Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first Historical Society program of 2026. And you are in for a real treat. I'll give you just a little bit of background. The introductions are on the paper that are on your chairs, and also is the list of everyone that submitted an item to be reviewed. And we thank all of you for such enthusiastic participation. The way this worked, Ken Farmer, our local movie star, reviewed all of the items, and then he sent them, he did the triage on them and sent the items to Leela Dunbar and Arlie Sulka. Leela does the sports and other types of memorabilia, and Arlie does the Tiffany. And then they chose a very selected group of items. This morning, those folks whose items were chosen came in and they each did an interview with the person. The Farmington staff took pictures, so you'll see those up there. But what they did not do, they did not give the big reveal. So the people that came here this morning have no idea. Is it real? Is it a fake? Is it a forgery? Did I pay too much? Did my mother lie to me? What's the deal? They have a lot to go over, and so we will give a little bit longer time tonight for the Q&A for 15 minutes, because if you're like me, I watch the Antique Roadshow and I think, oh, I have that. What should I look for? So I want to learn more about how to assess all those things you have in your cupboards from your mother and your grandmother and your aunt, and you can't bear to throw them away, but they haven't seen the light of day for 30 years. So now we have to figure out what to do with it. So no long introductions tonight. First up to bat, no pun intended, Leah Dunbar, the sports expert. Come on up, Leah.
Thanks, Punky. I feel like I'm on a game show. And that was our genial host. Our genial host is Punky. Thank you, everyone. So I have to ask, how many of you do watch Roadshow? That's what we like to see. And those others, start tuning into PBS. And do you realize 30 years, right? 30 years. I started the very first show in Concord in 1996. Ken, I think you got your start in Durham. Or were you in first year? I met Ken in Durham, North Carolina. Arlie started in 98. We do tell people we all started when we were 12. We're all prodigies. All prodigies. No one's buying it. I know that. So listen, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I don't know about Arlie and Ken, I think, but they probably get asked the questions that I do, the most important ones. And Roadshow really doesn't answer those. How do we get into this, right? How do we get started in this crazy field that we do? And how do we value things? Now, valuing is easy, you guys. It's roulette wheel, it's Ouija board, sometimes a magic 8-ball. It just depends. We take something out of the hat. No, there's really a methodology behind it. We actually look up other sales. It's very much like real estate. It just seems like that on Roadshow because we don't get to explain it. But tonight we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through our appraisals. Where are my slides? Chris, there we go. So we're going to start here. Backwards? Oh, there we are. All right. So I am best known for sports memorabilia, but believe it or not, that's about half of what I do. But it is interesting because I do get asked the question, do I like sports? And I'm like, I came from Boston. My grandfather played football at Yale. My Aunt Elena was the number 2 ranked tennis player in the country in the 1930s. My mom played tennis. My Uncle Don was a semi-pro player. My Uncle Nick played in the Red Sox farm system until World War II. And my dad was a demo derby and stock car driver. What do you think? And we're going to find out more about that in a second. But here's sort of my path. This is the gallery that my dad and I ran out of our former junkyard, which we'll tell you about in a sec. That's the 80s. And those are 2 snapshots from the Roadshow, which was really my big break because I got asked for the very first show and I started on the toy table. and I ended up doing collectibles for a number of years before sports. And you'll see one of my favorite pieces. Those are actually the original working lyrics to Stormy Weather on Cotton Club stationery. And that gentleman's Jeff Kohler. His grandfather was Ted Kohler, who wrote the lyrics on that piece of paper in a half an hour at a party because he needed to come up with something for Cab Calloway. I put this other photo here. Does anyone know? Now, I'm sure part of the audience is going to think this is the world's biggest onesie. But really, it's Sam Huff's Washington Redskins jersey from the 1960s. And that woman's father was a Politico, a lobbyist in the 60s. Sam Huff used to hang out and gave it to her father. Pretty cool, huh? And that's me at Sotheby's, because my big break was Roadshow. And because of Roadshow, I got to know all the folks at Sotheby's, and they're the ones who recruited me in 1999 to work with them running their collectibles department. And it was like going from double A ball to the big leagues. Now, whoops, I got to go back because that's a big reveal. So, some kids are born with a silver spoon. I was born with a chrome ratchet in my mouth. This is our junkyard from the 1960s. My dad ran a General Motors junkyard. It was the boutique of junkyards. All the cars were dismantled in our back shop with air guns. All the motors were set up here. And you can see we had custom racks for our doors there. That's my 79 Camaro there. And that's Ken Harrelson. My dad made doom buggies in the late 1960s, and Ken Harrelson of the Boston Red Sox, who was known as the Hawk and quite a dandy, bought this doom buggy from my dad. Now, you may wonder, why am I showing you this, and who is she? That was my dad's secretary, Dartha. You know, advertising was different in the 1970s. We wanted to save money, and that is a blonde wig. Now, my mom's name was Martha. So we had Martha and Dartha. Now, if that was in the making of a sitcom, I just don't know what is. But we did get a lot of phone calls from that. So again, Roadshow is my big break. These are some of my favorite appraisals from Roadshow. Just quickly, I'll give them to you. I don't know if you're familiar, that's the $1 million appraisal I did in New York. I had a woman come in with a collection from 1871-72 of Red Stockings memorabilia. Not red socks, but red stockings. They're originally from Cincinnati. And it's the first fan collection. And the big piece there is a letter that was written by all of the team to her great-great-great-great-grandmother, who was a landlady in Roxbury, and they were stranded in Washington, and they told her how much they missed her in her big meals. You wouldn't see that today now, would you? It'd be an email. That's a Walter Johnson signed baseball, which I estimated 60 to 80,000. It sold at auction for 315,000. So obviously I'm not very good at what I do. Stormy Weather, and this is just one of my favorite pieces. It's a really, really big bat, and I could not pick it up. Sotheby's, I was there for 9 years. I got to sell the bat that Babe Ruth used at the very first home run ever, grand opening day of Yankee Stadium, 1923, of course, against my Red Sox. And then the contract selling Babe Ruth from the Red Sox to the Yankees. Now, the bat sold for $1.2 million, and the contract sold for $1 million. Ruth was making, I think, $35,000. Think about that. And then for you golf fans out there, that was the #1 golf club collection in the world owned by a guy named Jeffrey Ellis. So we had Niblets, we had Mashies, and that sold for a record $2.2 million. And we also did entertainment. I actually had 15 departments: animation art, comic art, toys, cars, fashion, entertainment, and sports, and several others. So we did the Katharine Hepburn estate, which I could do a whole hour on of itself. The Johnny Cash estate, and of course the collectioner's Cher very much alive, some parts younger than others, but that's a whole nother story too. She was very nice. And I left Sotheby's in 2008, and what I do now, I'm a full-time appraiser. So people hire me to do insurance, donation appraisals, estates. I do a lot of dead celebrities. Arnold Palmer, Muhammad Ali, Prince, Greg Allman, oh my God, so many more. But those, Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, you name it. And it's a great gig because I get to work with a lot of institutions. But the best part of what I do, and it's the same thing with Roadshow, we never know who we're going to meet, what we're going to look at, and what we're going to learn. And now it's time to learn. So our first appraisal, where's Virginia? Virginia, raise your hand. You all know Virginia? All right. So Virginia had this major project. She went back it was after your father died, right? That they found all these letters that had been written by her father, Jack or Scotty Burns, depending on what you choose, to his family and to his wife-to-be, May. And these took place between 1925 and 1934 or 5, somewhere there, about a 10-year period. But they're concentrated in 1930 and 1931. Why? Because he was a minor league player for the Danville Veterans in the 3I League, the Indiana, Iowa, Illinois League. He was a minor leaguer. Now, what makes that really interesting and exciting to me, there are a couple of things. One, the letters were a fabulous slice of everyday life in the early 30s. Now, surprisingly, you didn't feel like the Depression hit. You did not feel that. But he talked about ice cream being cheap and eating a lot of it for 5 and 10 cents. He talked about what they would do for reading or going out to a show. And it was obvious in the affection. It was very emotional for Virginia, on the other hand, to see the letters between his father and mother, because how could you ever expect that? You see your parents in one different light, and here they are courting, right? From a historical point of view, for me too, you have to understand this was the beginning of the farm systems in baseball. Branch Rickey, who Virginia told me today, signed her father, which was fascinating, signed her father because Branch Rickey developed the farm system. He found that the only way that they could get a control over a large group of players was to actually own all the teams. Now, this is normal today, but this was landmark back in the 1920s and 30s, and he ended up building up a dynasty. So Virginia's father was part of that. Now, unfortunately, he was a pitcher. He never made it to the major leagues, but we got to see a glimpse of him going to spring training and then him being assigned to the Danville team for a couple of years. And the letters end with their wedding. The last letter is just before their wedding, and her mother, May, is talking about what a horrendous trip was to get the gowns, but she's ready. And I think he was ready too from his letters. So what she brought in were over 100 letters, various photos, and Virginia and her brothers, I believe, created, and sons too, and grandsons, created this book called Home Base. So if you want to see what the transcriptions are, you can take a look. But this is Jack, this is her father, these are some of the transcriptions, and there's the wedding photo. So you have an intersection here of a moment in time. And of course the major value is going to be Virginia and her family, because they tell the story of that family. And look, that's what the Roadshow is about too. You only get to hear this many of the stories that we get to hear every day. But from a monetary point of view, what we're looking at is what would the letters be worth a piece, and how do they relate in baseball, and what kind of a collector. So I would put, you've got over 100 letters, you've got the photos, I would probably put something like $3 to $5 a piece on the letters, but that adds up. You're probably looking at, for a collector, $300 to $500 to get that glimpse into minor league baseball. But for Virginia, obviously, they are priceless. And I will tell you one other thing before I go on to the next that I learned that I did. Again, every day is a learning experience. The first major league game that was played at night was in 1935, but Jack was talking about playing night games in the minor leagues in 30 and 31. I had no idea that they were doing that. So there's always these great nuggets that you get. So thank you, Virginia. We appreciate that. All right, Chip. Where's Chip? There's Chip. Or as I like to call him, the Chipster. Thank you, Chip. So Chip brought in 1956 Dodgers team signed baseball. And there's many photos of that. So how many people are familiar with the 56 Dodgers? Okay, we got a few here. There you go, before they left for LA. So the 56 Dodgers was the last year of the Brooklyn dynasty. It had started in 47 with Jackie Robinson breaking into the big leagues and continued with Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, they had Gil Hodges, they had Duke Snider, and from 47 to 56, they played the Yankees, I believe it was 6 times, and lost 5 of them. In 41, they also played and lost. But the only time they won was in 55. In 56, they played them to 7 games, and they were tied through 6. And in the 7th game, Don Newcomb, who had been the Cy Young Award that year, winner, who was the best pitcher in the league, and the MVP, his arm gave out, and they lost 9-0. I know. 2 months later, they went off to Hawaii. Jackie Robinson was unceremoniously traded to their long-standing rivals, the Giants. He retired rather than go cross town to the Giants. Roy Campanella, a year later, unfortunately had a horrendous car accident, could never play again, and then they moved to LA. So this is the last great team from Brooklyn. So when you look at these baseballs, you look at the quality of the signatures, you look who the key signatures are, and there's Jackie, there's Roy. I'm sorry, I can't point correctly. The 2 most important are Jackie and Roy. Now, interestingly, and I told Chip this, the Dodgers had a bat boy. His name was Charlie the Brow DiGiovanni. And he was very well known and even admitted in an article that he would sign for the players. Duke Snider said he could sign his name, Charlie could better than Duke himself. And in those days, players would sign 6 dozen baseballs every week, so they would get tired of it. And there's a telltale sign, and you can Google it online. If you have Jackie, Roy, and Carl Erskine all on one panel, chances are Charlie the Brow did his work. Fortunately for Chip, not here. They're all separated on here, and it's a good chance that these will pass authentication because that's really important to value. And the other thing we look at is condition, and these photos don't do it justice, but the ball is in much better shape than what it looks. So taking all that into consideration, and team-signed baseballs are valued winners over losers. So if you're in 8th place, only your mother wants that baseball, right? But being in the World Series and being an important team, it has more value. So as long as everything pans out, this is going to be somewhere, depending whether it pans, how much it pans out, probably between $1,200 and $1,500. So that's pretty good. Thank you, Chip. Up there, yeah. All right, Punky. Is Punky here? I'm not sure. Did she make it? Oh, there she is. So Punky's late husband, Ralph, was a huge Ty Cobb fan. And this is surprising because Ty Cobb played between 1905 and 1928. Ralph wasn't that old, okay? This is 1958. This is 30 years later. But he wrote Ty Cobb. And Ty Cobb wrote him back. Sent him a letter. And it says, "Dear Ralph File, thank you for your kind sentiments. I'm happy to comply with your request for an autograph. I feel honored. I am sincerely Ty Cobb." And he dated it. Now, what's the first thing that kind of stands out to you on this? The ink? It's kind of, how often do you see green ink? Believe it or not, Ty Cobb started signing with green ink when he started playing baseball in the major leagues, starting in 1905. And the story is he got superstitious. I would say 50 to 60% of the Ty Cobb signatures, autographs, letters are in green ink. It's very distinctive. I don't know of any other ball player. So the other major things you need to know about Ty Cobb, he's one of the greatest ball players of all time, of any generation, doesn't matter when he played. When he left, he led the leagues in career hits, 4,191. And by the way, no, I don't know anything important. I just know this stuff. And he also had 894 stolen bases, and he had the highest batting average in the league at 367. And he set 50 records when he left. And he is still relevant today. He is still one of the greatest baseball players. So I'm not surprised 30 years later that Ralph wrote him. His signature is not rare because he signed a lot in those days. People, you could write people. You could send this, I'm sure Ralph did, to Ty Cobb in Cornelia, Georgia. That's it. No address, no nothing. And Ty Cobb got it because everyone knew where Ty Cobb lived in Cornelia. And you could do this with many major leaguers. So what a thrill, though, to get this back in the mail. So we know it's authentic. There's no doubt about that. And what's great about this, it has the original envelope. And it had been, as Punky said, in Ralph's sock drawer for years. It has that sock drawer feel, right? So Punky pulled it out for him for a major birthday and had it framed. And he was thrilled about that. So again, it's another instance, just like Chip and Virginia, it means more to Punky and it did to Ralph than it does, to any collector. But at the same time, what a collector loves is to have a Ty Cobb signature, because it is rare in the fact that players that died before the era of signing shows are a lot harder to find and more desirable than later players like Williams or DiMaggio, or the players today who just sign and sign and sign and sign. So what do you think this is? What do you think the value is on this? Anyone? That 2,000? Do I hear 25? 2750, 3,000. I will tell you, okay. $3,000 to $4,000. If you want to make Punky an offer, she's in the back of the room. But as you know, she found it in the sock drawer, and I'll leave you on this. I'll leave you with this. You'll never know what you may find in someone's drawers. Thank you very much. I know the technology now.
See, now I know exactly. Okay, thank you. Oh, more pictures of Punky.
Oh, yes.
That's so nice. Okay, that's me. Okay, so I like to say I'm Tiffany-centric because I am a Tiffany eccentric. Oh, good. Okay, so we'll have to look at the slides because they're kind of fresh. So this is my first birthday in Rockland, Maine. And we didn't really own that lamp. This is why we have these wonderful people who work for me, these young people who know tech. And it was photoshopped in. It looks like I was like, ooh, Tiffany. But I'm afraid it's not true. But it is true now. So this is where the original store, I own this store now, but this is the store in the 1960s. I still don't even know what Tiffany is at this point. I am, let's see, 1950s, I take that back. This is Lillian Nassau. Lillian Nassau is the woman who founded the gallery that I now own. And she was credited with reviving the interest in Louis Comfort Tiffany and Tiffany Studios. Now there are two Tiffany's, and I always like to make this distinction. There's Tiffany and Company, which was founded by Charles Louis Tiffany, and Tiffany Studios, which was owned by his son, Louis Comfort Tiffany. And they were actually separate businesses. And Tiffany Studios was where the lamps and the windows, the blown glass, the metalwork, the mosaics, the church commissions, all of that, those came out of Tiffany Studios, not from Tiffany and Company. This was the store on 3rd Avenue where Lillian moved. She was there from 1945 to 1967, and then in 1967 she moved to the location where we still are, and so we've almost been there for 60 years. This is Lillian in the corner with her garden of Tiffany lamps. We've never been able to identify the man in the doorway, unfortunately. But he was quite the poser. And this was amazing because Lillian was buying every single piece of Tiffany she could get her hands on. And it got to the point, as you can see, the shades are stacked up under tables. And lamps that actually probably had bases became hanging shades. And that's what you're looking at now. Okay, fast forward. I came from Maine. I went to college in Massachusetts, and in 1978, I moved to New York City without a job. but I had been an art history major in college, and I wanted to work in the New York art world. And there wasn't much of an art world in Portland, Maine, so New York was the logical place to go. Well, I went there and I never left. I immediately got a job at this very small auction house. The person who owned the auction house was pretty much insane. And it was a good thing, because if I could work for this person, I could work for anybody. And there was a very high attrition rate. And because he would fire people without cause, or you got a better job. And I was one of the people who got the better job. And I left to work for Lillian Nassau. I met her at the auction house. I was showing her some things that were coming up for sale, and she said, if you ever want to come work for me, let me know. I didn't know who she was. And I had to ask my friends in the art business, who's Lillian? Who is this person? They go, you don't know who Lillian is? And at the time, I was also offered a job at Christie's, and I was deciding, Christie's auction house, and I was deciding between working at Christie's or working for Lillian Nassau. So my friends who were not in the art business said, oh, go to Christie's. My friends in the art business said, if you don't go to Lillian Nassau, you're going to miss out on the greatest opportunity of your life, because she handles every piece of important Tiffany in the world, and she is the doyenne. And I said, okay, whatever that means. And so I went to work for her, and I never left. I started January 2nd, 1980. I know, it's hard. Don't do the math. I started working for her, and then I worked for her son. And then in 2006, my husband came up with a business plan so that I could acquire the business from the family. And so I've owned it now since October 1st, 2006. And when I took over, I started to think, what can we do that's different? Well, one of the things we decided to do was to publish a couple of books written by, you see Dr. Martin Eidelberg there, and he is a professor emeritus from Rutgers University, but he is an authority on Tiffany. So he wrote the first book, which is on the left, Tiffany Favreau Glass, and The Quest of Beauty, and then the next book we did was Tiffany Favreau Pottery. And there I am at Roadshow. Now, I started doing Roadshow in 1998. My very first Roadshow was actually in Rochester, New York. We have not been back to Rochester for 28 years, and we're going there this summer, which is very exciting because I feel as though we're going full circle there. And this is an interview that I did for Greatest Finds. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of greatest finds. This is a fireplace hood that was designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany, and it was in his home that he designed for his dad. The home itself was designed by Stanford White, and Tiffany did the decoration in the interiors, and this was the fireplace hood in his library. And this was one of the great finds. I didn't know this existed, and a number of years ago, someone who had inherited this from his parents contacted me, and I went to see it in the garage with all of the rust and the cobwebs and the spiders, and it didn't matter. It was so exciting to find this, and now this is actually in the permanent collection of the Morse Museum in Winter Park, Florida. Not to be confused with Winter Garden? Leela. And this is another very important museum piece that we placed at the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. This is probably one of the first dragonfly lamps made by Tiffany Studios. It was designed by Clara Driscoll, who is one of the Tiffany girls who did the bulk of the designs for Tiffany lamps. And Lillian actually purchased this in London in 1970. And it was not wired for electricity. She did her own thing, actually, when she sold it. You see that wire hanging down in there? It's kind of odd. And when she sold it to the collector, she said, well, I'm going to electrify this for you, and it's going to cost you $375, which was a lot of money just to electrify the lamp in 1970. I then got a call many decades later from the collector and said, well, I have this lamp that Lillian sold us back in 1970. Do you want it back? Well, I started to do the research on it, and I realized that this was the lamp that was at the Grafton Gallery's exhibition in 1899 in London. And it had been in England all that time, and which was extremely exciting. So when I did get the lamp, when I reacquired the lamp for the gallery, we then sold it to the Corning Museum of Glass. And this is a picture from Roadshow, and then we'll get into the appraisals. So we're in Palm Springs, California, 2015, I believe. We went there twice so far. We were there in 2007 and then in 2015. And this man came in with a Tiffany glass mosaic. And turns out he had bought it from Lillian in 1980. And he had a wonderful story. He paid a lot of money for it. At the time, he paid $15,000 for it. And he was really nervous because he didn't know what I was going to say about whether he paid too much. And he was probably one of my most nervous guests. And he told his story about how he went to Lily and she said, oh, it's not for sale. That was one of her tactics. Oh, it's not for sale. And then he came back a second time. And she said, no, it's not for sale. And then the third time he came back, he brought her a bouquet of flowers. And then she had a price. And I said, yeah, the third time's a charm. It's like the date, the third date. And so in any event, she sold it to him. And he said it was in the dead of January. And he left, and she had some documentation that apparently she didn't hand over to him. And she came running down the street after him saying, you forgot your documentations, and she's waving it at him. It's freezing cold, she doesn't have her coat, and somebody who was working there, not me at the time, is running down the street behind Lillian, and by the way, she's 80 years old at this point, running behind her, holding her coat. And it's like, it was such a great story, and I could see her doing that. She was a very she had a lot of perseverance and persistence, and frankly, if it weren't for her, I don't think we'd have the Tiffany market that we have today, and for that, I am incredibly grateful. So let's talk about the appraisals. So Greg Bowman brought these in with his wife and his sister. But I have to tell you something, one of them's not Tiffany. And actually, I learned something today. I knew that the one on your right, on the right side, was not Tiffany, but I wasn't really sure who the artist was. So I had a little look, looked at the signature. Signature says Schmid, S-C-H-M-I-D. And there are a lot of Schmids who make glass, I learned. But I was able to figure out which one. But before I tell you about the famous glassmaker Schmid, I want to tell you about Greg's relative. Both of these vases belong to his great aunt, who died in 1989 at 98 years old, and she lived in her home in Jersey City until the day she died. It was 3 stories, I believe, and she slept on the 3rd floor, and I don't think that she had any help, caring for her. She had a coal stove, I hope I got this right, in the basement that she would put the coal in. It's like 98 years old, pretty amazing. She evidently had a soft spot for Tiffany because The other vase, which is on your left, is Tiffany, but I understand from the family that there were other pieces of Tiffany glass, probably flower forms, that were divided amongst other family members. So the question is, how did the Schmid vase get in there? Because the Schmid vase, it looks as though it's dated 1982. So that means she bought it when she was 91, or someone gave it to her. My feeling is she may have seen it and it had, it looked like a flower form and it was kind of something fun, or someone gave it to her who had seen the things that she owned and thought, gee, I bet she'll really like this. So that's the story on that vase. Now, that vase, sadly, in today's market, is worth $100 to $200. There's not a big market for Carl Schmid, but that's what I discovered today, doing my own research. Now, the other vase was made almost 100 years earlier by Tiffany Studios, and it dates from approximately maybe 1897, somewhere between 1895 and 1897. And it's Tiffany began making glass in 1892-93, and they made blown glass all the way and into the 1930s when they closed. I want you to see the signatures, particularly on the Tiffany. You see that it's just got a number on it. It has a little O, and then it has a 4-digit number. The little O is the indication that the piece was made in the 1890s. Little O numbers, for several years, we erroneously thought we were under the wrong impression that this was a special order vase. But there are about 10,500 special order vases. And in 1991, Martin Eidelberg, whom you saw in the previous slides, completely disproved that theory and said that the little O numbers were early pieces of Tiffany glass, only made between 1895 and 1900. Now, there is no other signature on the piece. Well, the reason is because at this stage, they weren't signing the vases. They weren't writing LCT, and instead they would put a paper label on it. And the paper label is long gone. But the thing about this vase, for me, it's not about the signature. The piece is the signature. Looking at the piece, I know immediately that this is an early piece of Tiffany glass. And it's what we call a flower form, same kind of form that you see in the German vase and the Schmid vase. And in terms of value, between $8,000 and $12,000. And Dee Bedell bought a lovely set, a Tiffany metalwork set. It's called, you'll see it right now. Tiffany sold desk sets. They began selling desk sets in 1906 and all the way into the 1920s. And they came in a variety of patterns, probably about 15 different designs. And they were always made of bronze, and they came in different patinas. We oftentimes see the brown patina, the green patina, sometimes even a silver-plated patina, but in this instance, we have the gold finish. And gold finishes actually cost more at the time because these are gold-plated. And so Tiffany would add another 25% on top of the cost of the desk set pieces. There are usually up to 30 different pieces in the sets, and you could buy them all individually. So this particular pattern is called the Zodiac pattern, and so it's decorated with a relief design of the signs of the Zodiac. And Dee told me that she acquired the set in 1973. She inherited it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dee. if I make any mistakes. And you had inherited it from family members who acquired it in the 1920s? Yes, okay. And which it could have been made earlier, even. I don't know whether they bought it directly from the studios or not, but they did. So this would have been from the 1920s. So desk sets are kind of interesting because in the world of Tiffany, they kind of the values for them went down over the past few years, mainly because most people have computer monitors on their desks. And if you ask a 20-something to tell you what the blotter ends are, they don't know what blotter ends are. It's quite remarkable, including two of my employees. I had to tell them what they were. And in today's world, if you need to make a blotter, you can't find anyone to make it for you. The fine stationery stores have closed. It's very difficult, and it's a big challenge for us when we sell blotter ends to try to make a blotter for someone. So what's happened is that there are certain pieces that have held their value and have increased in value, because those are the pieces that you can use, like the pen tray, still very useful, the letter file that's up in the upper left-hand corner, and the calendar frame that you see. Now, the calendar frame is actually a pretty good size frame, and in most cases, people will take out the calendar and make it into a picture frame. And those are sold really at a premium. She has the inkwell. There are inkwell collectors, but obviously not something that anybody uses anymore. So in valuing this set, I'm going to look at my notes. So the blotter ends they came in two sizes. These are the 12-inch sizes, and the other size would have been the 18-inch size. These short blotter ends are worth about $250. The inkwell is $350, and there were actually 4 different sizes of inkwells. This inkwell had a little bit of a condition issue in that there's a screw missing that held in the well, that held in the glass liner. But nevertheless, it's still a nice example. And that one is $350. The pen tray is $350. The letter file is $600 to $700. And the calendar frame, anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500. So all in, I would estimate, depending on the market, between $3,500 and $4,000 for the set of pieces. And here's some more pictures. And you can see, I'm holding the inkwell, and you can see where the screw is missing. But it's a wonderful set. And in particular, the best 2 pieces really are the calendar frame and the letter file. So, and now for Ken. Anyway, thank you all.
How am I going to follow them? It's an uphill job. You know, when Pookie said she wanted to do something like this, I said this last night, I said, who are the 2 people that I want to spend 2 or 3 days with hanging out? And you heard them. They're superstars, in my opinion, Renaissance women, just amazingly smart and good at what they do. And then they let me on. Arlie, Lee, are we not stuff nerds? I've been in a 12-step program my whole life, and I'll never expect to finish it. My mother said when I was a little boy that she used to take me to the Roses 5 and Dime, and they had those. Remember, some of you are probably too old to remember it, but back in the day, they'd have gondolas in these dime stores, and they'd have all the cheap stuff on the bottom part, but the Lone Ranger cat pistols were at the top. And she said when I was 4 years old, I climbed the gondolas to get to the Lone Ranger pistols. And she also said that I always had champagne taste on a beer budget. Anybody familiar with that? So, 30 years ago, Roadshow called me up and asked me if I wanted to come to Durham, North Carolina and do free appraisals at my own expense. And I said, I beg your pardon. Before that, I was in the auction business. I had an auction company in Radford, Virginia for many years, and my first love was Southern decorative arts and Southern material culture, but my first auction was out of the back of a pickup truck. And I think we grossed $3,000, and I made $600 during the real estate crisis in the the early 80s. You remember when they had the S&L crisis and all the commercial properties went upside down and interest rates were 6% and you couldn't sell real estate to anybody. And Jane and I didn't have any money or any furniture when we got married, so we started going to junk shops. Got married in '74, and one thing led to another. I found out that I could buy a Stanley level with brass on it at a yard sale for $2 and take it to the Charlotte flea market after I shined up the brass on it and sell it for $25. And one weekend we went there and we made $2,000 and I quit my job. The only person in our family who's ever had a real job is Jane. She taught school for 38 years. Okay, so do you guys even remember this? This is the most hilarious and funniest thing that ever happened to me on Roadshow. I'm over at Deck Arts or something. You know, they want to divide all the interest categories up. That's what Jane does at the front, and Andy does it at called triage. You know, like if you have a piece of Asian, you go to the Asian table, and if you have a piece of silver, you go to Deck Arts or whatever, you know. And so I'm at Deck Arts. This guy, Carl Crosman, Old Money New England, got the Ralph Lauren purple label suit on. He comes over to me because I know about Southern stuff. And you can tell how tall that is. That's a piece of alkaline glazed stoneware pottery, about 1860, made in Alabama. And at the time we didn't know it, but he had initials on the epaulets on his shoulder that said JL. And we found out later that meant John Lehman, who was a German immigrant who made pottery in Alabama. So we go on camera with it, and we start talking about it. And you picture this girl's name was Kathy. She's a good old girl from Alabama. So Carl says, so tell us, Kathy, where have you had this in your home? And she looks at him, she says, we've had it in the closet the last 2 months so the cat wouldn't pee on it. Truth, I set him up. Because when she told me that, as an aside, back in the green room, I said, oh, you got to say that. So, long story short, we put $30,000 to $50,000 on it. They sent it to me, and we sold it at auction in Radford for $83,000. And one very similar to it sold 5 years ago to the Birmingham Museum for $125,000. Decorated and figural American pottery is off the charts. So if you got a brown moonshine crock, that's one thing, but if you have an early piece of pottery that's figural or it has decoration on it that's unusual, that's one of the things that's really held its value. I gotta say that I'm just grateful that we came to Charlottesville 12 years ago because I love living here and fabulous things here. we're very fortunate in the business that we're in. 2 years ago, I went to a house in Edenton, North Carolina, ostensibly to appraise the leftovers of Hayes Plantation. And Hayes Plantation is the most perfectly preserved federal-era plantation house in the south of the Mason-Dixon line. Of course, there's none north either, as far as So this foundation made a deal to buy the whole plantation, and they called me down there. Jane and I went down there to do an appraisal, and this was sitting on the dining room table in a legal-size file folder. And I look at this. You see the date, 1787? So all these years of nerding out, I knew that the paper was right. I knew that that was an ink signature. That's Charles Thompson. He was Secretary of Congress when they sent these out to the states for ratification. They authorized them to print 100. And only 27 of them had Charles Thompson's signature on it, and this was one of 7. So, what was it worth? I got a roadshow colleague. This is one thing we do a lot. We talk amongst ourselves. And whenever we do an appearance, we have to say who among our colleagues said that we're right. Because you don't want to be wrong on nationwide television on Monday night and have to withdraw the appraisal. Long story short, at the time, we felt like it was worth $500,000 to $1 million because we weren't positive that the family had the right to sell it. And their lawyer made a deal with the state of North Carolina to get the state not to claim any ownership on it, because you got to remember they were issued to the states for ratification. And I sent that to Brunk Auctions in Asheville, and it brought, counting the buyer's premium, $11.5 million. Needless to say, Jane and I were watching this online, and we did the happy dance. It's funny. There was talk about it bringing 30 or 40 million, but come to find out, the real comparable that really made anything count was the fact that one of George Washington's copies of this had been bought and is at Mount Vernon, and they paid like 8 or 9 million for it. So that was really a better comparable. And it's just like that baseball. You said, 50 to 70, and it brought 3 something. You don't know till you do it. Sometimes rarity is very unpredictable.
Can't quantify emotion.
No, you can't quantify the fact that, we've got all this crazy money out here now, and you never know what they're going to, how much they're going to want it. And, what's a few million when you got a few billion? I've said that on my whole life. So Diana Strickler brought this in today. She's not here tonight. And this is a very, very distinctively American thing. There was a guy named Auguste Edouard who came to the United States in the 1830s. And he did silhouettes of families, and he was adopted and supported by many families up north and in Washington, D.C. And this is her family from the 1830s. The signature on the left-hand side there says Auguste Edouard, Louisville, 1831. So Edwards have price ranges based on the size of them and how many figures are in them and whatever. And so it also, there's an X factor for this because it's from Louisville, it's southern. And there's less material culture from down in the south, not because it all got burned up in the Civil War, but because the population mass was not there and there just wasn't that much of it compared to a lot of the urban centers. And that's probably a $15,000 item for insurance purposes now. Bill Kirkham. Bill and I had a great discussion today about his family and whether or not anything made in America or England says sterling. This is an urn, and let's see if we can see any of the marks on it. Yeah. Bill, you're looking mighty good there, buddy. You must have just got engaged. Congratulations. The great thing about this object, and I just want to go back to it a second and tell you about it. American silversmiths, prior to the 1870s, when the sterling standard required that everything say sterling, if it was sterling. Sterling is 925 out of 1,000. A lot of people think that American silver made before the sterling mark is coin silver, which is 800 out of 1,000, which is not true. We use the sterling standard just like the English did, and this one is stamped with two makers' marks. S. Kirk and Son, which was started in the mid-1840s, and another silversmith named Holland, who was in Baltimore, who quit making things. He died in the 1840s, so I assume he quit making things. So it's double marked, and it also has a sterling mark with an eagle head cartouche. And in England, the sterling mark is what's called the lion passant. It's a sideways view of a lion. It's just a little hallmark. And since the Renaissance, English silver has been hallmarked, so you can tell the date, the maker. Not so much with American, but this is a classical style of silver, from the Regency period, and it's engraved with your family's initials. I believe you said the family name was Gill. And the biggest question you ask yourself today is, when you look at a piece of silver, is it worth more dead than alive? And this one definitely is. This, I'd say, if a good dealer, that dealt in American silver would probably want retail at least $10,000 or $12,000 for something like this, because I don't know where you're going to get another one. With the double hallmark, both of those guys are, especially the Holland mark. There's a lot of his work is in the Baltimore Museum and even the Met. Who knew? But it is sterling and it's American. And the spacers on it are made out of ivory, which, on Roadshow we don't really talk about ivory a lot because we don't want to get into all that. The fact that it's an endangered species, and Uncle Sam will come to your house if you try to sell it. But you see the Kirk mark. And those other two marks are along the bottom. The other thing I love about this is it's got an eagle finial on the pouring spout, on the hinge. William Barker, front and center. Well, I got to say, this was one of the first pictures I looked at of anything that anybody sent us. And I thought, what a fabulous thing. And Bill sent me a lot of history on it. You want to just tell a little bit about your relative and why you got this? Keeping in mind that I'm already 5 minutes past my time.
As some of you know, I was born and grew up in Philadelphia, of Southern parentage, with one exception. My mother's father's family had long been settled in Philadelphia. And so religiously, several times a year, Christmas and Easter, and then what Mother called Decoration Day, we would visit the family lots and place wreaths and flowers, etc. And so next to the family vault of my mother's family was a vault that simply had carved on the top, DuPont Show. And I remember growing up finding it hard to pronounce, but my mother, who knew French, pronounced it properly, and I keep trying to memorize it. So the next time we would go visit, I'd pronounce it perfectly. Well, as I got into this work as Thomas Jefferson, I began to discover that Pierre Etienne Duponchot was the, what would you call him, equerry or private secretary of Baron von Steuben, who came over to train our troops at Valley Forge, and Duponchot wrote out those instructions that were later published. He went on after the war to become a secretary in our Department of State in Philadelphia, and Jefferson would greet him every morning coming in to his duties there in the office of the Department of State.
Hence, you had to have it.
Well, yes, and not to belay this, a friend of mine in Philadelphia called me up and said, you won't believe this, they're selling the portrait collection of the Law Library in Philadelphia. And he said, there are some wonderful artists here, and the prices seem extremely reasonable. And he said, and amongst them is Pierre-Etienne Duponchot, it says, by Bass Otis. And
In the catalog entry.
catalog it said, and I looked at it and I said, whoa, that's Sully. Now, look, you know, Sully came and spent 2 weeks at Monticello to paint the bust portrait of Jefferson that is in the hallway as you come in. And then after Jefferson passes, West Point ordered a full-length portrait of him. And Sully, as you may know, lived in Philadelphia, passed away in Philadelphia in 1872. And of course, Monsieur Duponchot passed away, I think it's 1844. Could this be possible? I just thought it has such a finesse about it of Sully's brush. So, long story short, my friend said I couldn't. I said I can't go up to the auction. He said I'll bid for you, and I said okay. Here's the ceiling, and I got it. and so I brought it back, and when we were talking about this event coming across, I decided, well, let's see what it is. So thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Bill. I couldn't have said it better. I was worried about it pronouncing the French name. Okay, so after much study and discussion with a couple of other folks that are specialists in Sully, it indeed is a copy of the Sully portrait by Bass Otis, which is not a bad thing because he was a very good painter too. And in order to even come close to getting that in Sully's catalog, it would have had to have been entered when he painted it. And the auction house that you bought it from at the time had a couple of people that worked there that were pretty knowledgeable. And most of the time when you buy stuff at auction, they'll use words like possibly, school of, and what they're doing is they're leaving the door open just in case, you know, and there's no, I don't think there's too much doubt that Bass Otis painted this, but the good news is that I think you got a fair price on it. And he did copies of Sully portraits and painted other people from life, and this, I think an insurance value on this would be at least $15,000 to $18,000. Because it's such a great portrait with the glasses and everything and the way it's done. And you know, that story of going to that graveyard and seeing this and knowing that name, that's what it's about for all of us. This stuff resonates with us, you know, and we want to, when we walk by it in our houses every day, we want to show it a little bit of love. Punky, I see you coming towards me. Okay, so 20-some years ago, I was working folk art, and a guy from Canada was the appraiser, and I looked up and they're filming what appears to be this big brown and tan blanket with some multicolored stripes in it, not super colorful. And I'm going, whoop-de-doo, you know, and come to find out it was a first phase Utes chief blanket circa 1840. There's only a handful of them known to exist. They did the appraisal. I think he put $300,000 to $400,000 on it. And the guy was retired, and Lee told me this. I didn't really remember this. That the guy was retired and working part-time at McDonald's. And he literally cried when he gave him the price. And it wound up going to the Detroit Institute of Art, I think, for around $400,000 or $500,000. It was a private sale. But I learned a whole lot of, I learned a good lesson that day not to judge a book by its cover.
Thank you, Robin. Any other questions? No?
What is the least,
What, Robin? There was a hand up here. All right, all right.
so this is for Layla Dunbar?
Lee Dunbar. By the way, did Lee and Arlie just not do fabulously?
Oh, so. As always, your check is in the mail.
I saw with interest the Dodgers baseball, and I'm wondering how much would a similar ball of the New York Yankees be for the same game?
Oh, it's a really good question. More. Because they won the World Series. So it's all because they're the winners. That would generally be more money. And Yankees are probably the most collected of all the teams in baseball because they have the biggest dynasty. They've been to over 40 World Series. I think they have 27 championships. And their legacy at that time, you're talking 1956, that was in the heart of the Mantle, Berra, Whitey Ford era. So but the biggest problem is, as much as you have to deal with Charlie the Brow, Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra hated signing. And they also had Pete Sheehy who would sign. So a lot, in fact, I sold Casey Stengel's estate when I was at Sotheby's, and he was the manager of the Yankees, and he had 8 or 10 balls that were all Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra clubhouse signatures. So no one was immune. But if they're legit, in that condition, you probably double the value, something like that.
Okay, one more question, Mary.
What are you hoping to see and find before you retire?
So that's a good question for all of us, right? Here. So let's, we're never retiring. I mean, what's up with that? Before we, oh God, well that's a fun question. I have to think about this. What haven't I seen? It's so funny though you mentioned it because we've been doing this so long. You think that you've seen everything and then something else will just pop up out of the woodwork. I mean, last week I did a Novak Djokovic racket that the woman at the 2023 Open had been sitting behind him and pushing him to victory. After every point, she was yelling, "Go Novak, go!" and over every changeover. And at the end of the match, which he beat Daniel Medvedev to get his record 24th Grand Slam championship, passing Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, he threw it up in the air. He went up into the stands. It's all on video. He came back down, and then he picked up the racket, and he's looking in the audience for this woman. And she's in canary yellow, not that difficult. Finds her, hands her the racket, and says thank you. So think about that. And every day I have to tell you for me is like that because someday it's game show memorabilia. Who knew the letter to Jeopardy could be worth thousands of dollars, right? Thank you, Ken. It's just I never know. I just don't know what's going to come through the door the next day, and that's what makes we never know what we're going to see, who we're going to meet, and what we're going to learn. That's the greatest part for me.
Ditto. If you'd asked me
3 years ago what I hoped to see, I wouldn't have had any idea that I would see a piece of paper that would be worth, 11 or 12 million dollars. My ultimate dream would be to go to a house somewhere in Virginia or North Carolina, and it would be full of fabulous Southern furniture and folk art, undisturbed. And nobody's ever been there except me.
Arlie? And I agree with Lee. They're carrying me out in my chair. you know, when you love what you do, you just don't want to retire. And it's funny because last year I went to a significant high school reunion, and which I'm not going to say the number, but I would say 85% of my classmates were all retired, and they couldn't believe that I was still working. I was like, what? Why? Why would I stop? But I've digressed. So what I'd really like to find is there were a lot of things that Tiffany made for World's Fairs, and they've gone missing. And every now and then something does surface, and mostly in the way of windows. There's some very wonderful Tiffany windows out there that we have never seen. I've seen black and white photographs from period documentation. That's it. So that's what I want to see before I retire, and I'm still not going to.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.